Hello there, and welcome back to the Elearning Champion Podcast, where we dive deep into the strategies, trends, and triumphs shaping the world of learning and development. Today's episode is really unique as we'll be talking about how L&D teams can help frontline operational leaders manage effectively through crisis and disruption. I'm delighted to introduce you to our speaker for today, Paul Falcone. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Sharna. Nice to see you.
Thank you. We're thrilled to have you join for us today. So, Paul is the principal of Paul Falcone Workplace Leadership Consulting LLC, a renowned HR expert, executive coach, and keynote speaker. With extensive experience as former CHRO at Nickelodeon Animation and head of international HR for Paramount Pictures, he advises on leadership and management across various industries. Paul is a best selling author of multiple books on workplace leadership and talent management, translated into 6 languages with over 750,000 copies sold worldwide. He is also a contributor to Society for Human Resource Management and an adjunct faculty member at UCLA Extension. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
It's my pleasure, Sharna. That was a beautiful intro. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Glad that it's good. So, before we dive in, dear listeners, make sure you never miss an episode packed with valuable tips and inspiring stories by hitting that follow button from wherever you're listening to us from. Okay, now to get started, Paul, what are the biggest challenges facing so many people globally right now in their workplaces? And why do fear, panic, and depression inflict so many members of our youngest generation of workers?
Yeah, Sharna, it's a big question, and it does impact everyone who's in the L&D space.
Right.
One of my books, the not the last one that I wrote, but the one before that, was part of the First Time Manager series for HarperCollins, and it was called The First Time Manager Leading Through Crisis. And coming out of COVID, coming out of this once in a century pandemic, we're
Right.
still in this post-COVID reintegration phase. It's very difficult out there. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And people are feeling it in the workplace. We talk about
Right.
burnout. We talk about people who are exhausted at work, the desire to leave the company where you work to go somewhere else.
Right.
But there's so much noise, Sharna. When you think about the politics that are going, the world, the wars that are going on across the globe,
Right.
global warming, people, this isn't stuff that they just leave at home. And when they come to work, they're just happy. This is all part of our world experience right now, and workers bring that into the office. And
Right.
so when I was excited to do this presentation, it was because to me, the idea is in the L&D space, we have to be coaches. We have to be able to
Right.
do that too. And we have to recognize that this crisis and disruption that is going on is part of our role now, regardless of whether we're management trainers or sales trainers or technical trainers. We have to understand where our audience is coming from.
Right. Yes, very interesting. So, how can an L&D team address many of the key concerns facing today's workers, including the ones you just mentioned, global wars, political destabilization, or even fear of AI?
Fear of AI too. I meant to say that. That's a good one. That was good. I
Yes.
should have thought of that, Sharon. Good for you. I think the idea is when you think of an executive coach, they do two things when they work with someone. They raise their level of self-awareness for the
Mhm.
for the client, and they raise their level of self-confidence. It's
Right.
those two things are ultimately what executive coaching is all about. I came from the training space where I was doing sales training earlier in my career. And nowadays I do management and leadership training, and that's what my books are all about.
Right.
But the reality is for the trainers themselves, even if you're a deep dive technical trainer, you have to know your audience. And you have to understand that they're coming to the table sometimes without peace of mind. They're so worried about other things that are going on that they can't concentrate on the training. So I think the idea is each trainer needs to be a bit of a coach. I mean, you're not an executive coach, don't get me wrong, but you do have to have a higher level of self-awareness for where your audience is coming from. And if there's one piece of advice that I can give trainers, no matter what part of the L&D world you're in, um, build people's self-confidence. Help them feel better, make it concrete. When I talk to people in the training, it's like, what can you use immediately afterwards? Now, not
Right.
everything is meant for that. Sometimes we're talking to them and it's more about career introspection. And I tell people, we're going to spend an hour together and that's great. But the most important part of this training is on your drive home tonight. Because when you drive home tonight, you
Right.
can think about this and figure out what is it that you want to adopt and what is it that you want to change. But at the same time, my expression is give people back to themselves. People are kind of lost a little bit. The Gen Z
Yes.
generation, the 27 and under generation, is testing as the most isolated, loneliest, and most oppressed generation on the planet, even
Right.
more so than retirees in retirement homes. And that's because they're the first truly digital generation, and the social connections that people like me, I'm a baby boomer, people like me have had, this generation doesn't have. As trainers, as good teachers in general, you have to be able to connect with your audience. And you have
Right.
to make sure that you can be that solution for them. You can help them find their way back to themselves. So that's the bigger picture for me in the training space. But I think it's such an important piece of awareness that trainers
Correct.
need to be, connected to.
Yes. Pretty much. Yes. So, generally speaking, L&D helps upskill workforces to meet the needs of tomorrow. So, should helping people find peace of mind truly be an element of focus for an L&D team's training curriculum?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Think of the peace of mind concept, Sherna. To me, it's the question I would always ask my employees on my team, either individually and or as a group, is are you able to do your very best work every day with peace of mind? And somehow when you ask that question, the peace of mind thing gets people to talk. And sometimes they'll say like,
Right.
well, Paul, I wasn't going to say anything. I mean, I wasn't going to complain, but since you're asking, well, no, I can't do all my best work every day with peace of mind.
Right.
And that opens up a conversation. And then we can talk about, well, why is that? And share that with me. Now, again, as a trainer, these people don't report to you.
Right.
So it's different. You're not the employee relations person and you're not the HR generalist. So I'm not saying try and tease out reasons why they're not happy. That's not the
Mm,
point. But the
correct.
point is to say, when you can tell the people that you're training new content, whatever that content is, whatever that format is, everybody, I want you to be able to master this with peace of mind. I want your self-confidence in this particular area to be higher than ever. I want you to be able
Right.
to sleep well at night, knowing that not only are you good at this, but you like it.
Right.
And I think when people say that, you say it, you smile as a trainer. They smile when they hear it because
Correct.
the expression we always use in the United States is, I've got your back, right? I've got your back
Right.
basically means that I'm there for you and you're not doing this
Correct.
alone. It's the same
Right.
concept with training. To the degree that you can incorporate that kind of language as you're imparting the training and the new knowledge, you'll find that their heads, nod and their eyes are locked in and they're engaged
Right.
and they're learning. And again, it's that idea of build their self-awareness, build their self-confidence.
Correct.
Let them walk out with something concrete that they can use immediately and not be afraid of so that they can play with it. Whatever it happens to be, you'll be a great trainer as long as I think you can make that human connection.
Correct. Yes. Human connection is really valuable. Right. So, what are some of the most common drivers of crisis and disruption that L&D teams should listen for and potentially address in their training?
Yeah, Sharon, a very good question. When I had written the book, I wrote it in three sections. And part one was individual crises.
Right.
Part two was departmental and team crises.
Mhm.
And part three was company and global crises or community crises, things outside the
Right.
organization. Any of those three could impact a person's ability to concentrate in the
Right.
classroom or master the material or go back to their office and say, I didn't get anything out of that training. It was a waste of time. Well, it's like,
Right.
that's no fault of the trainer. They just weren't in the mind space
Correct.
to be able to learn new things at that moment. So again, what I would say is, of course, if we see someone in the training who doesn't appear to be listening, I wouldn't call them out in public, but when we take a break, I would ask to speak to the person on the side And you can ask that question about everything going okay with you individually or with your team and your department or with the company as a whole. Is there anything that you want me to be aware of? And see where they go, because you never know. Someone may be suffering from something and you need to put them in different hands. You can say, well, let's finish.
Right.
Are you okay to finish the training? Yes, I am. Okay, now, as far as that's concerned, I may not be your best resource, but I'd be happy to stay with you afterwards and we can connect you to human resources or to employee relations or to whatever.
Right.
It's just the idea that we're not rubber stamping training. It's not a
Correct.
checkbox. It's not, okay, he's been trained on that. Check. Next, bring the next
Right.
one in. It isn't meant to be that. And I think
It
as
isn't
long as
meant to.
trainers, just like good managers, good leaders, there's a connection that they're making. I've always said great leadership is an emotional connection. When people
Correct.
describe the best boss they've ever had, Sherna, it's not their technical skills that they're describing. It's
Right.
it's who they were, it's their character, it's their
Right.
caring, the respect, the trust. Trainers have a great opportunity to do the same thing. You can create trust and respect in a meeting after in the first 5 minutes of a meeting. Or as a matter of fact, you can even set your rules. What I would do as a trainer is I'd say, okay, everyone, let's talk about the top 3 things that are important to me in this workshop. And before we go any further, I want to hear what your top priorities are. But I can talk about, what are my rules in terms of respect,
Right.
allowing people to finish their thoughts, making sure that you ask the question in the moment. Don't save it for the end because you're going to forget it by then. But,
Right.
I'm here, you guys. I've got your back. I want to build your self awareness. I want to build your self confidence. And when you go home, when this training is over in 2 hours, I want you to feel like you got this. That's my goal.
Correct.
It's funny, taking 2 minutes at the beginning of a training to just say something like that changes the whole engagement level because people
Yes.
feel more comfortable. That human connection is automatically made.
That's correct. So, how can L&D managers, sorry, how can L&D train managers to become the mentors and coaches to their teams, especially during times of extreme change?
Yeah, I feel like the times of extreme change only keep going faster. It
Yes.
does feel that way. The term I use is during COVID, we became adrenaline junkies. We just
Right.
could, the changes came so fast. We couldn't,
Exactly.
the other expression they use is you're building the plane while you're flying it. You were trying to figure this out in thin air. We have no idea. There's no precedent.
Right.
And that's what happened. Okay, now flash forward. That was figured 2020 to 2022, 2023. But the global instability, the politics in the United States, at least in our experiences, we've never seen
Right.
anything like this before. Everything seems to be under attack.
Correct.
I don't think if you're training someone in technical training, you should talk about these things. You don't open up and talk about it. That wouldn't be appropriate. That's not what the training is for. But at the same time, you have to be aware of the signs. And there
Awareness.
are
Yes.
little things, Sherna, that I think trainers can do. Like I say, opening it up with the idea of respect and the idea of
Right.
trust and the idea of I've got your back and the idea of I want to build your self confidence. And when you go home tonight, I want you to feel like you've got this.
Right.
That's on the opener. On the back end, you can say, anyone, if there's anything that you felt you needed to share, but didn't feel comfortable doing it publicly and you want to talk to me privately, please stay afterwards and I'm happy to talk with you. But you'll be surprised. And the reason I say this is now going back to the individual crises. When you've got people who are hurting, they could relate with a trainer in an hour or two more so than they can relate with a manager or maybe their coworkers. That person could become a real resource for them. Or
Right.
they've got a team or a departmental problem or a problem with their boss. They'll come up to the trainer and say, listen, I'm having these problems. I know that's not what you do, but can you help me?
Right.
Look at these opportunities to put them in the right hands. Right?
Right.
Who's the best resource for them in that particular circumstance? And make sure you're getting them those resources that they need because it's hard. And I say that for everybody. The world is not easy for anybody right now. And I just
Correct.
think we have to be aware of that. And it's like, okay, the world is going to go through these times. But boy, when you train, there's an ability to bond. When when you go into a training and you just connect with that trainer,
Yes.
that's a really good feeling. And if especially
Absolutely.
if you're in a big company and you're not getting along with other people, that person could become your go-to person because you need someone to give you advice. Just be open
Right.
to it. Be open to it. I'm not saying manage other people's employees because that's not appropriate. But knowing that you've got to, I always say my expression is listen with your eyes and your heart in addition to your ears.
Oh,
They
okay.
know if they've got someone who's kind of relatable, they'll talk to them. And at that point, you can say, well, let me introduce you to the HR person, or let me introduce you to whoever, because I think they're going to be able to help you. You'll sleep better at night, but you have to realize that the training function is a unique function that touches a lot of people's lives and can
Right.
expand beyond whatever the immediate training is that you're doing. So just to be aware of that.
Correct. Wow. Yes. Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. Like training does reach out and expands and in different aspects of our life. Yes.
It does. And
So
the same thing, sure, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Learning how to coach is different than learning how to manage.
absolutely.
And so I spend so much time teaching managers how to coach. The logical connection was, well, listen, I was in L&D for a good part of my career. I didn't really think about it. I never really thought about it. It's like I had a job to do sales training or I had a job to do X training, whatever it was.
Right.
But the times are more extreme right now. People are frightened.
Yes.
People are
Yes.
nervous. Now is the time to understand that there's a broader gift that you give in being their teacher. You can teach wisdom. It's more than teaching knowledge, right? Wisdom is knowledge
Right.
applied. It's a higher level. You have to
Yes.
be prepared to switch from the knowledge teaching to the wisdom teaching
Do the
because
wisdom
someone may
teaching.
need your help in that
Yes.
moment, and you may be the only resource that they have.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So CEO surveys show that innovation, agility, and accountability are core concerns for growing organizations. So, how can L&D teams prepare their workforces for matters relating to emotional intelligence or self awareness and a healthy sense of otherness and, let's say, selflessness?
It's a great question. To me, Sherna, first of all, we're role models. If you're in the L&D space, you're the teacher. If you're the
Right.
teacher, you're the subject matter expert. The behaviors that you model for everyone else sends a big message about who the organization is, right?
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
one thing to keep in mind. The next thing is when you think of CEOs, there's so many studies out there on CEO priorities and what they want. When I was growing up, when I was younger in my career, we called them soft skills. And when I would tell
Right.
managers, we're going to
Correct.
do soft skills training, they'd be like, no, we're not. Get out of here. We don't need soft skills training. Uh-huh.
Right.
Now all of a sudden we call it emotional intelligence. And it's one of the top 5 things that CEOs are looking for. It's the same thing, but
Yes.
they packaged it differently. But understand, in COVID, what managers or CEOs realized was our most important assets really do go home at night, and they may not come back the next day. We had the great
Right.
resignation. There were all these issues of people leaving companies and saying life is too short, and they couldn't find anyone. And I'm not just talking about Fortune 500 companies. I'm talking about the local restaurants. They couldn't find
Right.
waiters and cooks. I mean, where did the people go? All of a sudden, the C level, the C suite realized the asset that's the most important asset that we have is actually the people. So
Yes.
it really took a once in a century pandemic to make this realization happen. But what they said was if people are going to be working remotely because they weren't allowed to come to the office,
Correct.
how do we make sure that they feel engaged? And the bottom line is, they're engaged, they're giving discretionary effort, they're performing as well as they would be in the office if we could see them. And what
Right.
they realized, Sherna, was it's the relationship they have with their boss. That's the most
Yes.
important thing. It's not money is important, benefits are all that. I get it. But the relationship with your boss is the most important thing. And if you'll remember, there's that book called First Break All the Rules, where they studied, it was the Gallup organization that studied thousands of companies and tens of thousands of workers. And they came up with
Mhm.
that famous expression that says people join companies, but leave managers, right? They
Right.
join the company, they're excited to be part of the company, but 2 years later, they're like, I can't stand this person that I work for, I'm leaving. So,
Yes.
so, so once they realize, wait a second, it's the relationship that the managers have with their employees that even if they're out of sight, they still feel connected and they still feel like they can do their
Correct.
best work. That's when they realize that, this emotional intelligence stuff is about human connection. And that's something that we've, in this country, at least in the United States, we've taken that for granted. We always thought that people would just listen. If someone leaves, you just run an ad on LinkedIn and all the fish jump in the boat and you just pick whatever fish you like. That's not the
Right.
case. Talent scarcity will be the rule of the for all industrialized countries. It will be the rule of the land for the rest of the century. There's a great book out
Right.
there called The Next 100 Years, and it's by George Friedman. It was a New York Times bestseller, but it basically talks about all of the major economies in the world will suffer from talent scarcity. And
Right.
you have to know how to grow your own. You can't just rely on talent acquisition. It's about talent development. You have to
Correct.
grow your own people. So again, from a leadership standpoint, when you sit in the L&D suite, that perspective is important. You're not just teaching them particular skills. You're growing talent. You are
Yes.
building a bench of strength for your company to take your company forward because the retention is critical and your
Correct.
job is to help build out the high potentials, right? To build out the emerging leaders, to find the ones who really excel. And when you see those people in those training situations, make sure you reach out to their bosses and say, I just want to let you know I had 17 people in that class. And Paul Falcone really stood out. I was so impressed with him. And I just wanted to pick up the phone and tell you that because this awareness could be missed very easily. But again,
Right.
you're part of talent retention. You're the key to talent development. And that's where everything's going. So again, you're at the tip of the spear in terms of
Right.
helping companies thrive and reinvent themselves. It's cool. It's a good time. It's a cool
Yes.
time in that sense. So
Interesting. Yes. So coming to the Gen Z Zoomers. So Zoomers continue to test out as the loneliest and most isolated and most depressed generation on the planet. You just mentioned a while ago. So how can L&D teams address their needs as well as the needs of the managers who oversee them?
you almost could do separate training for quote unquote managing employees in their 20s, right? This
Right.
idea, it is different. And every generation to me, Sherna, has a chance to reinvent itself and reinvent the workplace and reinvent their life experiences. And every generation always has.
Right.
But that expression, but it's different this time, is true here. The reason why it is different is this is the first truly digital generation.
Correct.
This generation does not know a time without cell phones.
Yes.
And cell phones, when I was young, as a baby boomer, if I wanted to call you because you're my friend and I'd call you at your house, each house had one phone with a rubber
Yes.
wire connected to it in the kitchen. And when I called your house, one of your parents answered the phone.
Yes.
And I would say hello to your parents, and they would say, hello, Paul, how's your family? Oh, we're fine. Thank you. Can I please speak to Sharon? Bob? That turned into one child has a phone, one child has a phone, they call each other.
Right.
That turned into, well, we both have phones, but we don't use them as phones. We just text and IM each other.
Right.
In all that, though, there was a social isolation that happened. And
Right.
the COVID pandemic did not help. Many of these now that these are younger, high school students, college students, they had to do it remotely. They couldn't even go to their own
Right.
graduations.
Yes.
When they come into the workforce, my son started a job in 2022 in Chicago for a company that was headquartered in Boston. In 2022, you weren't allowed to fly. He didn't meet his
Right.
boss in person for over 1 year. It was different. It's very, very different. So again, what I think
Yes. It's very
L&D
different.
professionals need to understand is this socialization element is not necessarily natural. It's not necessarily comfortable to the younger
Right.
generation. But I will also say this, Shirna, as a society, we've lost our ability to pass wisdom from the elder generation to the younger generation. We don't sit around the
Yes.
campfire anymore and pass around the peace pipe and talk.
Right.
Managers have to do that with staff meetings, but L&D professionals have to do that too. You've got to get people almost into a
Talking.
discomfort
Yes.
zone, almost into a discomfort zone so that they become more comfortable
Right.
sharing and making themselves vulnerable in a healthy sense, but being able to
Correct.
talk about things. That's a key element. I don't care what you train. When you think about the younger gen, your job is to help them socialize more and to get more comfortable in that space. And again, your management training should focus on that too, because it is a
Right.
different level of training for the younger generations that only the younger generation that only knows digital. But the
Right.
digital in many ways has replaced interpersonal relationships, and that's causing this sense of loneliness. And that's, I think,
Correct.
something that we need to overcome.
Wow. Yes. Okay. Um, so Gen Y millennials and Gen Z Zoomers are, of course, the most studied generational cohorts of all time. They want career and professional development, a healthy sense of work life, family control, and a management team that cares about them personally. So, the return to on site work movement does offer many benefits, yet, many members of these two generations specifically resist fully on site work schedules and insist on remote or hybrid work schedules. So, where's the balance and what trends do you foresee?
That is an excellent question. I just wrote a blog on that, my blog post on my website, because I think it's so
Wow.
important. It's interesting. So here's what the research showed me when I did this. About 80% of the Fortune 500 companies are hybrid, and they're
Wow.
following a 3-2 model, meaning 3 days in the office, 2 days remote. That's about the
Right.
average. The days in the office tend to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The remote
Right.
days tend to be Monday, Friday.
Monday. Right.
So
Interesting.
if you think about that, about 80% of the of Fortune 500 companies are doing that. So are a lot of non-Fortune 500 companies. That seems to be the
Yes.
norm. I don't think we're ever going to go back to full on-site 5 days. There's no reason to. We've got the digital technology to allow us to. We proved during the pandemic that we can still keep the wheels on the bus. We can still keep the
Absolutely.
businesses running without being there, 40 hours a week on site.
Right.
The question now to me, and the reason I wrote this article was some companies are starting to move from 3 days to 4 days. There's a
Correct.
change.
There is change.
I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think we're going to go to 5 days. I would be surprised to see that because companies know they will lose talent. They won't be able to recruit effectively and they won't be able to retain if they don't have any remote. Because remember, one of the things the young generations want is they want work life family balance. And
Right.
because the level of angst is so high, anxiety, this idea of, they're the pressure is really, really there. One of the natural release valves, one of the natural things that happened was, well, okay, but you only have to go in, 3 days a week or possibly
Right.
4 days a week. So what I'd done in my blog is I wrote this article and I said, okay, if your company needs to move from 3 days to 4 days, because I don't think it's ever going to go to five,
Right.
but here's the script and use the script from your heart. And this is important for trainers too. I understand where the younger gen is automatically saying, I don't want to go into the office at all. But if I have
Right.
to go in, the less the better. The only problem is, truthfully, I've been talking to CEOs in my consulting practice, and they're not coming from productivity paranoia. If we can't see them, we don't know what they're doing. They must come back to. That's not what people are talking about. That's not the dialogue.
Right.
The dialogue that I hear is, you know what, Paul? Some of the best friendships I've ever made, the best mentors I ever had, were in my early years in my career. I'm still friends with a lot of those people. And I feel so bad for these younger gens who have gone through COVID. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't walk down the aisle when they graduated. They're working remotely. I read a statistic and I don't remember exactly what it was. It was like 20% of the Gen Z Zoomers, the ones who have jobs, are still working from the bedroom that they grew up
Right.
in their family homes. They're not able to make things are too expensive. There's just too much stuff going on. But the bottom
Yes.
line is, again, you got to get people back to themselves. I think the idea to me, Sherna, is as a coach, as a mentor, as a trainer, as a manager, you have to be sensitive to these things. And
Right.
again, understand that while I get it, I know they say they don't want to have to work on site. You have to sell the benefits. You have to talk about the fact, the importance of friendships, the
Correct.
importance of mentorships. You as a CEO, when you send your message as a business owner, send that message with a heart that says the most important connections I made in my first 10 years in business. And I'm just afraid that people aren't getting that experience. And I want to make sure that everyone feels connected to our culture. And I also know that we're going to get the best collaboration when people are working
Yes.
side by side. You can only do so much over a Zoom or a Teams or a Meets call. So the idea to me is Sell those benefits and sell them from your heart. People
Right.
will, but don't do what at Amazon they just did, where they said you come back to work starting this day. They didn't give any transition time,
Oh,
or you're fired.
oh,
And what happened
right.
is a lot of people left Amazon in Northern California and San Francisco. They left Amazon, they went straight to Microsoft. So
Right.
Microsoft got all these people. Amazon shot itself in the foot. You have to have a heart. People are used to a certain way of, we're only doing 3 days a week. If you're going to move it to four, you better give me 90 days notice at least. I've got to
Yes.
rearrange for childcare and everything else. And the
Yes.
final thing I said in the article was give them some kind of incentive. And I'm not saying
Yes.
pizza. I'm not saying give them food. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm
Yes.
talking about is talk about creating a formal mentoring program
Right.
on your campus, or developing some type of rotational leadership opportunity where people get to spend time in other departments to learn about different groups. Put something together that they would not be able to do remotely. But now that they're
Wow.
coming
Yes.
together more in person, I have an opportunity to sit in other departments, to meet with people outside my original group, to collaborate with people that I don't normally work with. Give them something that motivates them to come back. So, again, as a trainer, be aware of where this stuff is going.
Right.
Be part of that solution, be part of that energy, be part of that movement. Because to your point, the CEOs are looking for agility and flexibility and accountability,
Yes.
all that stuff. Even if you're not doing leadership and management training and talking about that per se, you can still weave that into your sales training or weave it into your technical training or whatever
Absolutely.
it happens to be. It becomes part of who you are. That's part of your brand as a leader, or excuse me, as a trainer. And that will come out because you're linking what you're teaching them to those very core values. And that makes a big
Yes.
difference. That's how people see you. And they'll say, that's the best trainer I've ever had, because he understood more than the training. When I
Right.
sat in Paul's class, he connected me to a higher purpose within that organization. And he helped me see things about my career that I never even thought of. That's the greatest gift I think a trainer can give.
Wow. Yes. Absolutely. So, okay. Now, coming to a different question, what role should gratitude play in leading teams, and how can L&D specialists discuss gratitude during their training sessions so that frontline operational leaders can make gratitude and recognition part of their personal brand?
Yeah, now that'll fall more under the leadership and management training window.
Yes.
But the funny thing is, I talk about it all the time. I've always talked about it with my teams when I was a manager myself. And again, my corporate career, Sherna, ended 3 years ago in 2022 because I
Oh,
launched my own consulting firm. But I did three
wow.
decades in corporate. Um, Talking to people about gratitude and what is it that we're thankful for. And again, you guys, I'm just going to take 2 minutes, but just focus in on this for a minute. Anyone want to share what they're grateful for? And I'll go first. And I want to talk about this company because this company I've been with for 7 years. And what I was able to do here is blah, 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 blah. They've kept a roof over my head. They helped me put my kids through school. I'm grateful for a lot of things about being here. Is anyone comfortable
Right.
sharing? And you can do that for 3 minutes. But the funny thing,
Right.
it gets people in the right mindset. The opposite of gratitude is not enoughness. And in this world, there's not enough of a lot of things, especially now. There's
Right.
not enough peace of mind. There's not enough calm. There's too much anxiety. There's too much change. There was that famous book, Who Moved My Cheese? If
Right.
you've heard of that one about the little mice, and it's a cute little parable, but the mice, when you move the cheese, some of them are okay with it, some of them are not okay with it. Most
Right.
human beings are the same way. You can't move my cheese. The cheese is supposed to be there. Well,
Right.
if you're going to build agility, you have to help people understand that the cheese is going to be moving more often. And what
Correct.
does that actually mean? And what does that look like in your world? And the funny thing is, the anchor is gratitude. If you can keep coming back to this sense of gratitude, which automatically gives you peace of mind,
Right.
it helps you realize, what? It doesn't matter what I'm learning, and it doesn't matter how quickly the business is changing. I'm going to be okay. And then the next gift that you have is okay. And if you feel that sense of I'm going to be okay, I will tell them as a trainer, I'm only going to ask you one other thing. Give it away. Pay it forward. Give it to someone
Right.
else. Because the universe knows you cannot give away anything that you do not already have. So to the degree that you can give away peace of mind, and you can give away self-confidence, and you can give away self-awareness and whatever else. It just comes back to you. Karma is real, right? What emanates from you
Right.
returns to you. Give that gift. And trainers, especially in a world that's moving towards talent development and talent retention and internal
Yes.
promotion, where are you going to look? We have to upskill. We have to reskill. We have new AI technology, blah, 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 blah. Who's
Yes.
doing that? Who's training this stuff? It's the L&D team. So I
Yes.
think that our role is getting much broader because
Correct.
it's just the way industry trends and business trends and economic trends are moving. But boy, you have an opportunity to explode your profession right now, not just to be a great technical trainer, but to be a teacher of wisdom. And that's really where you're going to feel so much better about yourself because you're living your own values.
Right. Yes. So, coming to values then, how can a value-based leadership minimize the effects of crisis and disruption in the workplace?
That's a good question. I write about that in my book. And I'll tell you a quick example. Nickelodeon animation was the best job I ever had. And we had
Wow.
such a wonderful, it was a fun place to work. But the GM, the general manager who headed up the studio, was the best manager I ever worked for. And he would sit when new hires came in, sure enough, he would sit with them on day one and he would go around the room. And usually about 15 people or so. It wasn't a big studio, it had about 600 people, but every 2 weeks, we had new productions coming. Mark would sit
Right.
with them and say, "Tell me about yourself and tell me about your background real quickly." We go around the room, "Tell me why you came to Nickelodeon." And
Right.
the truth of the matter is, they were leaving Disney and they were leaving Warner Brothers Animation and they were leaving DreamWorks Animation to come to Nickelodeon because they wanted to work for Mark. He had that
Wow.
reputation in the industry. But at the end of the meeting, he would say, "I want to tell you about my grade 8 rules. And these rules, if you live them, are more important than what's in the employee handbook or the policy and procedure manual or the collective bargaining agreement or the code of conduct." And he'd start to talk about his values. Now, I don't use his values because he told me, "Paul, these are mine." I said, "That's fine, Mark, but I use my own." But what I talk about is, always have others' backs, have their backs.
Right.
Bring out the best in your coworkers. That's rule number one. Okay, and then we can proceed. You might have three, or you might have five, or you might have a dozen. But the bottom line is Mark had his eight. And
Right.
it's fine. It's almost like, how do you want to do this? What are those values? And
What are
how do
those
you how
values?
do you articulate them? Because when you can share that with people, people know what's expected of them and they automatically respond to it because it's like they know what's expected of them. It's like a warm hug. This
Right.
isn't laissez-faire, do whatever you want in our company. He would tell people, "Look, I've worked here for 15 years building this culture. And now I'm holding each of you accountable for perpetuating the culture that we've built. You are part of
Right.
this family, but you are responsible for perpetuating this family and the culture that
Correct.
we have here, each of you." That message took away all the problems. We just didn't have many employee problems because everyone was happy. But what I realized, when your CEO is the one making that comment, everything aligns. Normally in
Right.
organizations, CEOs aren't like Mark, in my experience. He was the exception. But that doesn't mean that your leadership brand can't emanate, that you can't reflect that same
Yes.
idea. So again, in the L&D space, to the degree that you're comfortable, share what those values are. And it doesn't have to be part, "Oh, every session I have, I talk about this." It isn't. Just make it part of who you are so that when you're talking about things about having people's backs and making sure people could do their best work every day with peace of mind and bringing
Yes.
out the best in your peers, that can be a little add-on to one little thing where you're saying, "And you guys, and if you do this correctly, understand that doing this in the system is going to make it much easier down this end." And in a
Correct.
way, you'll be giving people such a relief because they're going to say, "Ah, this is finally fixed." And you're part of that solution. Make yourself part of that solution. It's encouraging to hear that. I want people to walk away from my training session not feeling like they learned necessarily something that's important. I want them to feel like they felt something, they
Correct.
experienced something that can make them a better person, a better worker, a better coworker, a better leader, a better subordinate, whatever. I want them to be excited. And so peppering what you're doing with some of these coaching wisdoms really can make a big difference in the overall impact that you have as an L&D expert.
Wow. Yes. Absolutely. And This brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the E-Learning Champion podcast. We've covered a lot today, from learning how to balance disruption, gratitude, and even meeting the needs and value-based leadership. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. It was my pleasure. Thank you for introducing me to your audience. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So, dear listeners, I hope you're walking away with some fresh ideas and actionable steps to elevate your learning and development strategy with all the inputs we've received today. If you found value in today's conversation, please do drop us a message. We've got more fantastic episodes lined up featuring incredible guests like Paul and tackling the topics that matter the most to you. Find us on your favorite social media platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in to the E-Learning Champion podcast. Until next time, happy learning.
Bye, everybody.